Hello, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Hart HPSV01B brushless 20-volt cordless stick vacuum. So let's get started. And starting off at the rear of the vacuum cleaner, we have the battery slot, which will accept any of Hart's 20-volt batteries. I really would only recommend using 4 amp hour batteries or higher, well, if they made anything more than 4 amp hour batteries, that is, because quite frankly, anything underneath 4 amp hour batteries is not really going to give you any sort of real usable runtime with this particular vacuum. And moving upward, we have the handle or hand grip. Now, overall, the hand grip is perfectly fine and does a good job of allowing you to control the vacuum. I personally would have preferred it to be maybe a little bit thicker, but overall, it still has good performance, and I really don't see anything wrong with it. And moving upward above the handle, we have the 3 buttons as well as the LED indicator. Starting from the back of the handle, moving forward, we have the power button. Now, the power button has a little bit of a delay from when you press it from when the motor turns on. The delay is about a second and a half, and it's definitely noticeable. But overall, it really doesn't impact the performance. Moving on to the button in front of the power button, we have the Eco Mode button. Now, the Eco Mode button I originally thought was defective or just not very well designed or made or programmed, because I really did not think it was working correctly. Now, what was happening was I would press it and the motor would not have any sort of a change in the sound, or there really was no difference in the suction, and I had to play around with it for quite a while in order to figure it out. What happens is when you first press the button and you don't have any attachments, or you're using a large nozzle attachment, or you're not on a carpet, the motor will still have enough power to spin at full speed. Once you put a load on there, meaning once you put it on the carpet or once you put a nozzle attachment that is narrower, the motor will naturally go down in speed to the Eco Mode setting. So that's that. I really think the Eco Mode is still fairly decent. It definitely does not have nearly as much power as full power mode does, but at the same time, that's probably going to be a good thing, but we'll get to that in a minute. And moving on from the Eco Mode button, we have the beater bar on and off switch. On default, when the vacuum cleaner is turned on, the beater bar is engaged and active. When you press the switch once, it will turn off the beater bar as well as the LED on the floor nozzle attachment, and so that's the way it is. There really is no way of controlling the LED separately, and so if you want to use the LED on the beater bar or the floor attachment, you're going to have to leave it on. So if you're working on a hardwood surface, this might be a downside, but overall the operation of the switch itself works just fine. Okay, moving on from the beater bar brush, we have the LED indicator lights. And I'm not a huge fan of these lights, and I'll explain why. And the first reason is, well, quite frankly, the manual does an abysmal job of explaining what the different meanings for the flashing, colors, and anything else are. Other than the explanation for the Eco Mode, there is no other information for what flashing lights mean on this particular vacuum cleaner. As near as I can tell, a solid red light will indicate a loss of suction, and a motor safety switch will flip on, turning off the vacuum cleaner, and a flashing red light will mean a low battery indicator. So other than that, I really have no idea what some of these different functions mean. Another reason why I'm not a fan of these indicator lights is because they're so simple. There is no indication for the power level, meaning that all 3 lights will remain fully lit even when the battery gets low, and quite frankly, that's a little bit of an issue in my mind. I really don't like having to check my battery level by looking at the battery itself, especially on a $200 vacuum cleaner, or a $150 vacuum cleaner if you purchase it without a battery. Quite frankly, I really think that at this price point, this really should have had a digital readout screen for the battery level, the power mode, and any issues that you might be experiencing. And that is totally something they could have done at this price point, because I've seen plenty of tools that are under $50 that have digital readouts. So quite frankly, I really think that this vacuum cleaner's LED indicators are not up to snuff, and they're not well enough explained, and quite frankly, it should have a digital readout. So overall, I definitely think this is a con or a downside to this particular vacuum. And next up, we have the dust cup removal button. Overall, the button works just fine. There really is no features that stand out, but it really doesn't need any outstanding features. It does its job, and it does its job just fine. So overall, it's good. Okay, moving on to the dust cup itself. Now overall the dust cup is made out of a transparent plastic which will allow you to see the debris and the filter on the inside. So overall I do like the fact that it's made out of transparent plastic. Now the capacity of the dust cup is not as much as you might hope it would be considering the size, and that is because of the size of the filter housing. Now to access the filter housing, you simply open up the lid of the unit by pressing up on the lid where it says to push, and then you'll be greeted by the sight of a fine particular filter on top of the filter housing. Now the filter housing and fine particular filter are both separate pieces and you can remove both for easy cleaning, so I really do like that particular feature. Now the filter housing itself has a large debris filter, which is a silver screen that goes around the entire circumference of the filter housing, and it does a good job of keeping the larger debris away from the smaller filter or the fine particular filter. So I definitely think that's a good design. Overall the filtering system is good and I definitely think it's perfectly adequate even if it isn't HEPA. Now to access the debris that is in the tank without having to go through the filter system, you simply go to the bottom of the tank and then you push on the little lever and then the hatch will open, emptying the debris onto the floor, or if you thought ahead, into the trash can, whatever your personal preference is. So overall the dust cup, even if the capacity isn't as big as I would personally hope for, is still good and it will still be more than adequate for finishing up a couple of rooms and the stairs. I don't think this is a good particular vacuum for cleaning the whole house, but there's another reason. It's not necessarily the capacity that I have an issue with here, but we'll cover that in a little bit. Okay, let's talk about the beater bar attachment or the floor tool, whatever you want to call it. This particular attachment actually works fairly well on carpeted surfaces, and I've been fairly impressed with how much debris it's able to get into the vacuum cleaner's dust cup. I definitely think the suction is worthwhile, and it will be able to suck up pretty much anything that will fit underneath it that's about the size of a penny or smaller. So definitely a good attachment for working on carpeted surfaces, so I have to say it gets a pass here. Okay, now on hardwood surfaces or smooth surfaces, the vacuum cleaner still does a fairly decent job. I don't think it's as good as it is on carpet, but at the same time, I really think that bristle brushes are better suited for carpet. But that's just my own opinion. I really think if you're working on a hardwood floor more often, you're going to be better off with something that has a microfiber beater bar, but that's just my own experience with these sort of things. Now, the performance is good. It does a good job with getting the larger debris, such as pebbles, large pieces of dirt, bits of food pellets, leftover snacks that have ended up on the floor, hair, you know, that kind of stuff. When it comes to the smaller dust and smaller debris, it will be able to get the top layer of stuff, but at the same time, you're definitely going to be leaving behind trails, and you're going to have to finish up with a Swifter or an electric mop or something. So I really think that the performance is more suited for carpets with this particular vac head, but it still gets a passing grade, so it's still adequate. Now, clearance-wise, you can get this vacuum into a lot of spaces you won't be able to get a full-size vacuum into. You'll need about 3 inches of space to get the full head into, but you can get the edges or the tips of the head into spaces that are about 2.5 inches in clearance. So overall, I really do like using this for getting underneath certain kinds of bookshelves or underneath the bed. So definitely a good feature. And the LED light that's on the front of it definitely helps illuminate and helps you see what you're trying to vacuum up. So that's also another good feature. So I really do think that makes this a very useful vacuum in a lot of situations. Now, the maneuverability of the vacuum cleaner is actually very good, and it's very useful for when you're working in tight spaces. It's definitely much more maneuverable than a full-size vacuum, and that is definitely a pro in my opinion. Unfortunately, one downside to this particular vacuum head, or to the vacuum itself in general, is the fact that you can't leave it unattended. There is no way for the vacuum cleaner to stand up on its own, and even if you lean it against something, there's a good chance it's still going to fall over just because of how it's weighted. That battery at the top definitely makes it a little bit top heavy. So overall, I really would have preferred a self-standing design, or at least a better way of leaning it against stuff, other than having to leave it on the floor or back in its cradle. So that's a little bit of a downside there. So overall, the vacuum head or the floor head of beater bar attachment is good. It's just not as good as it could be, but it still will get the job done. It's not really that bad, but at the same time, it's nothing to write home about either. Okay, let's talk about the wand. The wand is a nice quality wand with the metal contacts at either end for powering the vacuum head attachment, and it does a good job. I haven't had any issues with the loss of power or any bending or anything like that. So overall, I do think the wand is of a high quality and it works well with any of the accessories. Okay, moving on to the micro crevice tool. Overall, this tool works good for getting dust, and that's about it. Overall, if you try to suck up anything too large into the straw ends of this tool, it's going to cause it to get jammed up and eventually cause the vacuum cleaner to turn off because of the loss of suction. So overall, it's a decent tool for dust, and that's it. I really don't find this tool all that useful, and I don't really use it very often, so to each their own. It's just not my personal favorite. Okay, moving on to the upholstery tool. Overall, the upholstery tool does its job, and it does its job just fine. It doesn't feel like anything exceptional, and the build quality isn't all that wonderful. The one nice thing is the brush attachment is able to be removed and then reattached, and so that is useful. And I definitely think this is going to be one of the more usable attachments that comes with the vacuum cleaner. So I think it's decent. It just isn't anything exceptional either. And so it squeaks by with a pass. Okay, let's talk about the Crevice Tool. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos on vacuum cleaners, you'll know that I pretty much never like the Crevice tools that are included with vacuum cleaners. Overall, this particular Crevice tool does its job fairly well, and it actually is not a bad design. It can fit into a lot of spaces, and it's actually long enough to be useful in those spaces. So overall, I do think the Crevice tool is good on this vacuum cleaner. I will say that I would have preferred it be made out of a thicker, heavier duty plastic, because the plastic that it is made out of gets beat up very easily and has already started to scratch and get dings in it. So overall, I have to say the Crevice tool is good. It would have been nice if it had been a better quality of plastic. So it actually gets a pass, which is really unusual for Crevice tools when I review them. And last, and definitely at least, we have the dust brush attachment, or at least that's what the manual calls it. I think this is what you use for getting the cobwebs off the ceiling or getting dust out of high places in a dusty room or something. I really don't find it all that useful. I mean, it does have a head that swivels, so I guess that's kind of cool. I don't know. I just don't find this particular attachment all that great, and I really have not used it a whole lot. So it is what it is, and I'm glad there's something else at least in the box, but at the same time, I just don't use this tool. Okay, let's talk about the wall mount and charger, since they are two different things. Starting off with the wall mount, overall the wall mount, well, it's a solid piece of plastic that has been molded and then cast into a particular shape, and it just is... It is what it is. There's no frills, there's no features. It can hold the vacuum cleaner plus 2 additional accessories and the battery and charger, and that's it. I really think that at this price point of $200, you really should be getting a wall mount that has integrated charging so that you could charge the vacuum automatically when you hang it up, and not one of these dumb chargers or saddle chargers that you have to take the battery off the vacuum cleaner and then plug in order to charge. So overall, I definitely think this is a weak area for this vacuum. I really would have preferred an integrated charging solution, and there's plenty of examples of vacuum cleaners that are underneath the $200 price tag that have this. So I don't really think Hart has much of an excuse here for not having this integrated. And another downside for the mount is the fact that the storage area can only house 2 additional tools when there are 4 additional tools, meaning that 2 of your additional tools are, well, you're going to have to get a little bit creative on how you store them. Whether or not you throw them in a drawer somewhere and forget and lose them, or if you decide to store them in unapproved areas on the mount itself. Either way, this is not a good solution, and the fact that they didn't spring for the additional storage spot, which probably would have cost them 25 cents or so, is definitely a major downside in my opinion. Okay, now let's talk about the runtime. Now, Hart claims that this vacuum cleaner has up to a 45-minute runtime. If you turn off the beater bar, switch it over to eco mode, and point it into a wind that's blowing towards it, you might get that 45-minute runtime. Here in the real world, however, where you're using the beater bar and you have it switched over to the full power mode, you're not going to get that runtime. You're going to get something a little bit less, like only 14 minutes worth of runtime. And that's after you've turned the vacuum cleaner back on after it turns itself off to save the battery. So quite frankly, the runtime is not very good and definitely leaves room to be desired. I really don't think this is a good vacuum cleaner if you're looking to clean up a full-sized house. I think if you're looking to clean up an apartment, a room, or clean up messes, or just get under beds or something, this vacuum cleaner is good. But quite frankly, for a full-size house, yeah, you're not going to be able to get that done with this vacuum cleaner without multiple batteries. Okay, let's go through the pros and cons real quick. And the first pro would be the suction. Overall, this vacuum cleaner really does have good suction, and it does a good job, so the suction is a pro. Power tool batteries. Overall, I really do like being able to use the exact same battery which I use in my power tools inside a house vacuum meaning I won't have to have multiple battery systems. I really do like the fact that this particular vacuum comes with 5 different attachments, so I do think this is a pro. 18 volt. Yeah, I know it says 20 volt, but read the fine print, you'll see it's really 18 volt. I really like the fact that it uses 18 volt batteries, and it's the same batteries that I can use in my power tools. So overall, this is definitely a pro. Ease of use. Overall, this vacuum cleaner is very easy to use and very easy to maneuver. So overall, I think the vacuum cleaner definitely has its advantages over a standard size vacuum. 2 different power modes. Overall, I really do like having an eco mode and a full power mode because, quite frankly, the full power mode is going to drain your batteries too quickly, especially if you're trying to clean up a large area. Easy to clean. Overall, most of the parts on this vacuum cleaner are easily removed, and that makes it very easy to clean, so definitely a pro. Weight. Overall, I didn't actually end up weighing the vacuum cleaner, but it is fairly lightweight and it's very easy to maneuver, especially when the roller bar is turned on, so quite frankly, the weight is fairly good on this vacuum. And the first meh is build quality. Overall, the build quality actually is fairly good. I just do not like the shiny plastic. I really would have preferred a textured plastic to the shiny plastic because shiny plastic scratches really easily, and quite frankly, I don't like the way it looks. And the first con would be it can't stand and it's hard to lean. Overall, the fact the vacuum cleaner cannot stand on its own is definitely a con, and the fact it's really hard to lean is also a con. So definitely a con in my opinion. Runtime. Overall, the runtime on this vacuum cleaner is not all that great. If you have the beer bar turned on and the eco mode not engaged, your runtime is going to be right around 14 minutes. And the final 2 cons would be the LED indicators and the price. Overall, the LED indicators are not very well explained in the manual, and you're left guessing to what they mean half the time. I really think it should have had digital to display. Now, the price, on the other hand, is definitely, well, it's overpriced. I really think $200 is too expensive for this vacuum cleaner. I really think something around $150 with the battery would have been more reasonable price. I just don't think with all the shortcomings of this vacuum cleaner, it's worth the price tag of $200. I think if it had a charging docking station or a hose that had an additional attachment or something, it would have been worth that price. But as it stands right now, $200 is too expensive. And that's it for the pros and cons. Final thoughts on this vacuum cleaner. Overall, I do like this vacuum cleaner, and I do think it does a good job. But there are definitely some major drawbacks to this vacuum cleaner. The fact it doesn't have a charging docking station, the fact it can't stand on its own, the fact that the LED indicator lights are so poorly explained or designed, and the fact that it's super expensive. Well, I guess it's not that expensive, but I still think it's overpriced, are big drawbacks to this vacuum cleaner. If you can find it for around $150 on clearance at your local Walmart, I think that's a good deal, and I would just watch it online too occasionally. It does pop down to around that price. But for me personally, I wouldn't go out and pay the full price for this vacuum cleaner. I found mine at a good discount, and that's how I got mine. So just keep your eyes open and be aware of that. It's a good vacuum for getting into tight spaces or doing stuff that a normal size vacuum won't be able to do. So I think that's a good aspect of this vacuum. I just don't think it's a good whole house vacuum, and I don't think it's really worth the full price. So at the end of the day, I recommend it if you can find a good price on it. And that is it for the video. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. God bless.